So, hello everyone. My name is Charles Levinsky. I'm the treasurer of East Brunswick Astronomy Club, and our fearless leader Isaac Azoris is not here tonight, and he's asked Paul and I to take care of this meeting. So, here we are. We're going to get started and move on. This is our agenda for tonight. You've already gotten the welcome. If you didn't, welcome. And Paul will be talking about stellar image stretching and how. Well, I'll let him explain it. He's much better than I am. We'll go over the observing conditions, talk about some upcoming events, both outside the club and within the club. We'll have a discussion about a couple subjects, and we're not going to be outside observing, though you're free to take your telescopes and walk outside when we're done if you think you can find a clear spot. But I think that would be a little challenging. Just to give you a background, particularly if you're new to the club, we were founded with the mission of encouraging and promoting an interest in astronomy and space. We meet once a month on the third Thursday of the month at the East Brunswick Public Library. And the meetings usually include a short lecture, an open discussion about something, and weather permitting telescope observing. Group is open to adults, teens, families with children ages 12 or younger. We've had some, maybe seven, I think, is the youngest I've seen. So that's pretty much it. If the weather is clear, feel free to bring your telescope with you. And sometimes we'll have several people with scopes out there doing observation at the library itself. Okay, I'm going to introduce Paul Framhein. Paul is the Vice President of Technology for the East Brunswick Astronomy Club, and he's also a very avid astrophotographer. So, Paul, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Off we go.
There you go.
All right. So, sometime mid last year, some of you may have been present when I gave a talk on the more tangible aspects of how astrophotography works. I brought in one of my imaging telescopes and all the various bits and pieces that make all of that up and did a broad overview of how astrophotography gets done. And it was really just the tactile aspect. This is the telescope, the camera, the filters, and all of that. But since you can't really look through an imaging telescope, it kind of leaves something to be desired. So the next logical thing to do at some point would be to do this. This is the computer part of how astrophotography gets done. I'm using a program called PixInsight. It's similar to Adobe Photoshop, but it's focused very specifically on astrophotography. And I have preloaded some data that I took, I guess, mid last year. We are going to be looking at the Horsehead and Flame nebulas. And I'm going to show you how I go from what you see is a kind of just regular star field, what you would see if you looked up into the sky. And we're going to go all the way through until we get to the end where we have a really nice image to look at that you may have seen if you saw examples of my work at the last presentation. So, like I said, I have pre-doctored some of this imagery. It's many, many images. I think there's like 40 or 50 that make up this. I've already done all the compositing. I've done all the alignment. I've done all the color calibration, and I've chopped off the really long and boring bits at the beginning. So at this point, this image is stacked and sort of ready to be stretched. So when I get an image like this, typically one of the first things that gets done is I like to actually remove the stars. It is easier to stretch an image that does not have a star field in it. If you try and do it all together, I find that usually more often than not, I end up blowing out the stars, right? They'll start to clip too much white signal. So we're going to start by using a program called Star Exterminator. I'm running it on this image. It's going to figure out what's a star and what isn't. And it's going to split this out into two images, one of which I will show you stretching. We'll do the nebulosity in one image. And then a much more general stretch I will apply to just the stars. They really don't need it quite as much as all of the stellar gases and such. I will be doing, for the one of them, it's called a general hyperbolic stretch. And the basic idea of what this whole process entails is I am going to be eliminating parts of the light spectrum that don't have the data that I want. So unlike a typical Photoshop workflow, a lot of times with Photoshop, you're adding things. I'm not adding anything. I'm really just getting rid of sections of the picture that don't really matter to me. When you look at the waveform of light, the reason this is called narrowband astrophotography is because there's really only a tiny chunk of the visible spectrum of light that we really really care about. So we're going to kind of chop off and discard the sections of the light spectrum that we don't need. Unfortunately, astrophotography software tends to require quite a bit of horsepower. This is not something that you would really want to do on a laptop or an old home computer. My desktop is somewhat large and powerful. It's a side effect of my day job. I'm a systems administrator for Rutgers University during the day. So I have spent more money than I probably should on my computer. So you can imagine that doing this task on a laptop would probably, while doable, it probably would take a very long time. The RC Astro plugins that I have lined up here all use very specifically trained AI. You've seen, almost certainly everyone has seen ChatGPT, Gemini, or some other example of an artificial intelligence. They can be trained to do very, very specific tasks. The fellow behind RC Astro has trained very specific AI models for use in manipulating stellar photos. Kind of are pretty self-explanatory by their name. Star Exterminator removes stars. Noise Exterminator gets rid of various types of noise, and Blur Exterminator does precisely that. It's a deconvolution filter that really helps to sharpen your image. And we'll use all three of them. I've actually used Blur Exterminator once already tonight in prepping the images for this little talk we've given. So here I've got our star field, and I am going to just stick him over here. We don't need him right now. And at this point, it's a little preview of what we're hoping to achieve. This is kind of what the image is going to look like when we're done. And then once I finish with that, I'm going to merge the stars back in with this. So at this point, I need to do one of these. I'm going to eliminate a little bit of blur. This plugin should run relatively quickly. It's going a little faster than the other one, but that should be the last step before I can actually get into the meat and potatoes of stretching, the actual image stretch itself. And we're going to do a nice short stretch, nothing too terribly crazy. The idea of image stretching is you're trying to highlight sections of the image that are less bright and bring them up to the forefront. You don't want to go too far, though. I mentioned it a little bit before. If you try to stretch an image with the stars still in the image, the white, we call them hot pixels, they get too bright, and you can end up in a situation where you've gone past the limit of what is the maximum value for brightness is. And at that point, you start to lose data. It's called clipping. Similar principle to clipping in the audio world. If you push a signal too hard, eventually you lose some of that signal. And just like in the audio world, you end up with a square wave. It sounds nasty. Well, same kind of thing happens in the visual world. You lose data and it looks nasty. So we try to avoid all of that, which is kind of, like I said, the principle behind why we stretch stars and we stretch the stellar matter separately. That way we don't run into that particular problem. One of the early mistakes I made, and I said, why does my image look all grainy and nasty like that? Oh, well, because I didn't take the stars out first. Okay. So at this point, I am going to pull up the image transformer. I should be doing a generalized hyperbolic stretch. I'm going to turn on the preview. And I'm going to start, I think, in a nice dark region. This is pretty dark. I'll do it here. So we'll stop there. I'm going to send that to the symmetry point, and we're going to start to stretch. Okay, a little too far. What I want to do is just bring this image up to barely where I can see it. And then I'm going to pick another dark area. And I'm going to send that to my symmetry point. And I'm going to continue to slowly stretch up this image a little bit at a time, looking for some of the darker areas. And I'm going to pull the data up a little bit at a time. And I went a little bit too far. I want to go back some. A little bit of want the curve to drop back a little bit so I don't really lose any definition. And I'm trying to keep the curve here at a point where I'm not clipping, and I've lost a little tiny bit, but that's not too terribly bad. Now to one territory, so I should back that away a little bit. And this really is just a matter of adjusting where my symmetry point is, where the curves kind of collide, and then adjusting the stretch factor. Now, what's happening is by this process, we're throwing away stuff underneath and stuff above the curve. That will be easier to see when I go to stretch the stars. It'll be a little more visually easy to see, but I'm happy with this stretch, so I'm going to apply it. And don't mind the preview because we've finished with this and I can now close it. Okay, so we've now stretched that stellar image, and it's quite a difference from what we started with, but it's not the whole deal, right? That's just the nebulosity. So now I'm going to go back and we're going to stretch the stars. So I'm going to use a slightly different process for that. Instead of the generalized hyperbolic stretch, I'm going to use a histogram transformation. And this one is sort of where you can see a little more of what we're doing. So I care about the data towards the bottom. So we're going to start to stretch a little bit. And as you can see, some of the stars, more of them start to come out. And this is not quite so. No, I don't. I'm on the right thing. I am on the right thing. Second guess. I don't want to go too far because eventually these will begin to blur out, and that's bad. So this looks okay enough to my eyes. Now I have a good star field. So that's good. But, now I have two separate images. That's still not great. So what we're going to do now is in utilities, I believe it is, combine images. I'm going to mush these two back together. I am going to merge the stars with, I think it's this one. Of course, it's not going to let me go away. Yeah, background extraction. Fine. Okay, so it's going to run through a quick preview. Pick one. All right, and that should be the finalized image. In this particular section, you can mess a little bit with some of the settings, vibrance, amount, if you wanted to play with this a little bit. I don't spend too much time here for the most part, but you can if you so wish. The rule of thumb is you can increase these values until you start to get star halos, and then you went too far. But at the end of the day, sometimes less is more. And with that, we have finished what I usually do for the basics of stretching an image. Depending on how much time I really want to put in, I will spend a lot more time actually digging through all of the settings for how to adjust noise and how to adjust blur. This was just really kind of fast and dirty. You can see there's a little bit of noise that's gotten left over in some of the clouds. We're trying to keep this particular presentation close to about 15 minutes. So I kind of rushed through a lot of that, but in many cases, you'll see people spending a lot more time on each individual step. You'll see what I mean about clipping, right? So when I look at some of these values, this pixel right here is most definitely hot. And you see a value of 111 for RGB. That means I went a little bit too hard on this particular stretch. It has gone beyond maximum value. Usually you'll see something more like, 0.6, point whatever. That's kind of the process that you want to run through. I've skipped over a bunch. There's a whole tool chain about, batch pre-processing. You load all of the images into this tool and it will do some very fancy automatic calibration, rendering, bias frames, calibration frames. These are all the images that I load in, and it runs for like 2 hours on end. Finally alerts me that I have finished my run. But that is the lightning talk of how does one stretch a stellar image.
I have a question, Paul.
Shoot.
How big are these file sizes?
So these can get pretty ginormous. Um, Let me open up my file manager and I'll actually take a quick look. They are pretty big. The camera itself is, well, put it this way, the one flat image here is 290 megabytes. Actually, let me see. Yeah, so each one of these images, the fit files, they're each 50 megs. And this particular project has taken up 150 gigabytes or so of space on my big share.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, they're working with raw files. They're very, very big. So if you want to do this, you kind of really do have to have a decent storage arrangement. Like I said, my day job is a systems administrator for the university. Sometimes my work follows me home. I have a pretty big network attached storage device down in the basement where I keep all of this stuff.
I had a
Okay, Charlie,
question.
shoot.
You immediately, when you separated the two, you separated the
Mhm.
star field from the background, and we went from seeing almost nothing to suddenly something kind of similar to the image you have here.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure I understood what that step was before you started stretching.
Okay, so that little preview arrangement, the program runs essentially like the short, sweet version of what I did. It's not high quality. It's just meant to be a preview. It's called a screen transform function, and it kind of figures out the basics of a stretch, and it applies a very, very basic stretch just so you can kind of see what you're working with. It's very fast. It's not high quality, but it is enough for me to look at an image and kind of take a look and see where I want to start. Like you can kind of see that, down towards the edge, I've got a little bit of lightish blue creeping into my image. And there was a lot of that on the preview. That's because my telescope has a little bit of a light leak, and that's the ambient light kind of creeping its way into the imaging sensor. The fast and dumb stretch that I use to get my bearings doesn't take into account any of the various types of calibration or anything that I might do to mitigate that when I'm actually stretching. So another step that I took before we started the display was I ran what's called a gradient extraction. It removes junk like that kind of creeps in, but that's another one that can take a while. That was like a 10-minute operation. I was like, nah, I don't want to try and do that live. That's a little unpleasant.
Hmm.
I guess sort of a shameless plug. If you actually want to see some of this artwork, I'm going to be putting some of this stuff up at the library. So if you actually want to stop by and check it out, it will be up for, I think, like the whole month.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. It's a little too complicated for me at this point. I mean, there are a lot of steps I think you skipped over for us so that we didn't watch it happen for 3 hours.
No,
And,
I spend upwards of 4 or 5 hours per image doing this. So, it's a huge topic and we can really get into it if people find interest, but that didn't seem like a quick 15-minute chat.
well, thank you for all your efforts, and thank you for putting the presentation together for us. All right, so let's move on. So this is the weather overview for right now. So the picture is what's outside pretty much right now. So as you see, it doesn't look like we're going to be doing much observing unless you have some way to see through that I don't know about. But this is the first time I've ever used this program. I know many of you probably use it all the time. This is the Astrospheric program. So if you've never used it, it's a tremendous amount of information in it, I found, including, you know, the- well, pretty much everything. Paul, you're probably much more familiar with this than I am, but besides temperature. So if I believe these are satellite paths.
Yeah, the big white one is the International Space Station, and the yellow one is sunrise, sunset.
Okay. So there's a lot of information, and it's www.astrospheric.com, if that's of interest. This is what you would see if we were able to see through the clouds today. This has shown us where the various planets and some key constellations are in the sky. And this comes from the program Stellarium. web. Again, many of you probably use this. It's the first time I've actually used it, and it's really powerful. I was pretty interested. I don't know where it decides where the trees are on your property. I think you have to upload an image or something.
Yeah, you can do that on the desktop version. I don't think the website will let you do that.
Ah, okay. But so these are if you were to do that, these are the trees, and it shows you where it would be blocking part of your view if you were to view from your backyard. I thought that was a very nice feature. And here,
Yeah,
this gives you
I use that feature a lot. As you know, mentioned, I'm
yeah,
very much into astrophotography, but my backyard is very, very occluded with trees, so it's useful to know, "Hey, I shouldn't even bother trying for that. It's behind the trees."
yeah, exactly. And this gives you the planet visibility, assuming you don't have any obstructions, and tells you when they're visible, daylight hours here, nighttime hours here, and that you can see when each of the planets is visible in principle, and of course, constantly changes. Question: has anybody gotten any additional pictures from our last meeting of the planetary parade? Isaac was particularly interested in whether anyone got additional shots. If you do have any new images, please feel free to send them to Isaac, and we'll include them in one of our future discussions. Now, I picked these two sets of images up from the web. On the right side, most of this is already passed, except for the lower left corner here. Mercury and Saturn will meet on February 24th. So that should be interesting, providing the sky allows us to see it. And then on the left side, these are events that will occur in the future. We always seem to get, because we meet later in the month, if we use the current month, we get a little behind the time. And I figured we'll try to get ahead this time and jump forward to March and some late February events. This one is just the planetary alignment, of course. But then on March 14th, there's a blood moon eclipse, Pi Day 3.14, Pi Day blood moon eclipse. Then on the 23rd, Saturn's rings vanish, apparently, because now we're viewing them on edge, correct? That's the
Yeah,
reason, I
yeah, for
believe.
it's a rotation. It takes years, the rings are right on the cusp of being perpendicular so that we will not be able to see them, and it's gonna take,
Mm.
I think, on the tone of, like, 5 years before they get to a point where they're clearly, discernible again. Interesting cycle to watch if you don't mind taking pictures over a several year period.
Over a 5-year period, yes. There's a partial solar eclipse on March 29th. The Lyrid or Lyrid meteor shower on April 22nd. And the triple conjunction, we were talking about this before we started the meeting, looks like a big smiley face, or Paul, I think you pointed out, it looks more like a Cheshire cat. So this will happen in late April. So these are other things you can make a note of them, and it gives you a reason to go outside and do some observing. We are always looking for people to present topics that would be interested to the club membership. And if you have any ideas for such a presentation, please contact Isaac. This is his email address here. We are booked now through June. We have several other presentations coming up, but after that, we're open. So we have also had a thought that maybe of putting together in one of our meetings a series of mini presentations, so that maybe if we can find 4 or 5 people that have a short 5-minute or 6-minute presentation about a particular subject, we could have several of these in one meeting. So if you have any ideas along that line, please contact Isaac. He is looking for these, and it would be exciting to get some of the other club members up there presenting as well. These are events that are coming up. Now, these are not East Brunswick Astronomy Club events, but these are events that might be interesting to the membership. This is a presentation at the New Jersey State Museum. I have never heard of this before, sonification. So the way they describe it, it seems that it's some translation of the galaxy into some sort of sound and series of tones that can actually capture patterns that we are not able to see visually. And so there will be discussion about this Saturday, actually, 4:15, and Dr. Carrie Fillion will give a presentation on how this works, and it's a free visit to the planetarium for this discussion if you're interested. On Saturday, March 1st, there's an updated version from UACNJ on their YouTube channel about what you can see in the night sky through March. And they do this short video that reviews some things available. And this speaker, I believe he's the same one who does it every month. I'm not sure, but I've seen a couple of his before, and they are actually interesting. Coming up in early April is the Northeast Astronomy Forum Show, the NEAF 2025. Now, they claim this is the world's largest astronomy and space expo. So you can register now for the show. It's in Suffern. I've gone to a couple other shows, not the show. at this location. Suffern, New York is not that far. It's about an hour and a half, I think, from our area. And the college is nicely laid out, and they have a really big exhibition area. So you can register here with Neat. The website and the link is on screen now. Is anybody planning to attend this at present? I know this is very popular for some people. I know Isaac said he wanted to go.
Yeah, I'm planning to go.
You're going as well. Anyone in the audience planning to go at this point? Someone's gone in the past. Excellent.
Yeah, my only fear is that I'll go and my wallet will be very unhappy with me because I'm going to find all sorts of things that I just have to buy.
So there may be some other people from the club going. That's great. And anybody who's interested, I'm told it's a really interesting show. All right. Now, next month on Thursday, the 20th, we're having now 6:30 rather than 7. Our meetings are usually at this time of year at 7 o'clock. This particular one will be at 6:30. And part of the reason is that we're trying to encourage some younger people to participate. And the subject will be rovers and the East Brunswick Robotics Club and one of their members, and Christy Champignon, who is actually a member of the board on East Brunswick Astronomy Club as well, will give a presentation on how autonomous vehicles work on Mars and on Earth. And the Robotics Club will actually give a demonstration on how they work. Because space is limited on this day, the Robotics Club is going to require some of that space for their demonstration. We have a limited number of seats, so registration is required, and we would encourage you, if you want to attend, to reserve as soon as the registration opens. We're in the process of working out exactly how many seats will be available, and as soon as we have that information, the registration link will be available. Will be available through the ebastro.org site, right?
Yes, it'll be there through the website and as well as on the library calendar.
Perfect. So do keep that in mind, especially if you have younger kids or siblings who are interested. It's a great time to get them involved. Something that has a lot more actual robotics going on. Okay, and that concludes our meeting. Please stay in touch with us. We're available here on Instagram, and this is linked to the club website as well. All right. Well, thank you all for attending, and hopefully we'll see you at next month's meeting or at any future meetings. And we're always looking for more people to get involved, especially youngsters, get them involved in the hobby early and free time. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And thank you again to Melissa for keeping Paul and I organized here and keeping everything working smoothly. And Paul, thank you so much for your presentation, taking the time to prepare it.
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you again, Melissa, for all of the help. It wouldn't go nearly as well without you.